What's up, friends? Welcome to the Scrap Trawlers channel where we do EDH on a budget. Today we're bringing you another deck tech. As always, our budget for this deck is $50 or less, excluding the commander and basic lands. For this episode, we're cooking up something tasty with one of the new C21 Commander Pre-Con Legends. It's Gyome, Master Chef. Gyome is a 5/3 Troll Warlock with Trample for 2 black-green. At the end of each of our turns, we make a food token for each non-token creature that entered the battlefield during that turn. We can also pay 1 mana to sacrifice a food and make a creature indestructible until end of turn. So how are we going to win with Gyome? Since Gyome makes a bunch of artifacts, in the form of food tokens, we want to play into that and look for ways that having lots of artifacts will make us stronger or hurt our opponents. For cards that hurt our opponents with artifacts leaving and entering, we've got Underhanded Designs and Marionette Master. Underhanded Designs lets us drain our opponents whenever an artifact enters a battlefield under our control. So we'll need to make sure to have a few mana open at the end of every turn to pay for the drain effect. And for Marionette Master, we'll definitely want it to enter with the +1/+1 counters so we can hit an opponent for as much life as possible whenever we sacrifice a food token. Next up, we have our Nim effects. These are cards that are either creatures that get +1/+0 for each artifact we control, or cards that pump one of our creatures for that amount. For Nim creatures, we have Nim Devourer, Nim Grotesque, Nim Lasher, Nim Shambler, and Nim Shrieker, which all have the same growth effect, but with different abilities, power toughness, and cost. And for pump effects, we have Cranial Plating and Hunger of the Nim. Important to note, if we're looking to take out our opponents using combat with a giant Nim army, it's best if we don't sacrifice too much of our food, except in cases of emergencies. If we want to go the combat route, we'll want ways to make sure our creatures connect with our opponents' faces. To help with that, we've got Blossoming Bog Beast, a new card from Commander 2021 that gives all our creatures at least +2/+2 and trample each combat. We've also got Overrun for a one-time Alpha Strike effect. And one of the best cards in the deck is Champion of Lamphold. This card is so good in this deck because we're already dropping as many creatures as possible to make food tokens with Gyome, so we know Champion is going to be getting a ton of counters and making our army basically unblockable. To assist us in making more food, we've got Feasting Troll King, which gives us 3 on entry, Gilded Goose, which gives us 1 on entry and lets us tap 2 to make another. Gluttonous Troll makes food equal to the number of opponents we have. Tempting Witch makes 1 on entry and lets us sacrifice foods to drain opponents. Witch's Oven can make 1 or 2 foods by sacrificing a creature. And Second Harvest is an instant spell that doubles the number of tokens we have. We're going to need a lot of mana to make sure we can cast all of our creatures. And since we want as many creatures to enter the battlefield as possible, we'll focus on creatures that give us more mana. We've got some sacrifice effects with Sakura Tribe Elder, Burnished Heart, and Diligent Farmhand. Springbloom Druid sacrifices a land on entry to go fetch 2 basics. Elves of Deep Shadow, Llanowar Elves, and Skull Prophet all tap for mana. And Wood Elves fetches a forest on entry. And for non-creature ramp, we have Soul Ring and Cultivate. To keep making those food tokens, we gotta make sure that we constantly have a handful of creatures to cast, so having plenty of card draw effects will be crucial. We've got a few non-creature spells with Ecological Appreciation, a new tutor spell from Strixhaven that puts 2 creatures into play. Winding Way, which can also be used in the early game to find us lands if we need them. Costly Plunder, which sacrifices a creature or an artifact to draw cards, and Foreboding Fruit can make us a food token if we only spend black mana on it. And then we have Reprocess, which lets us sacrifice artifacts, creatures, and lands, and draw cards equal to the number of permanents sacrificed. This can be great for the late game if we're sitting on a ton of food and need to fill our hand. For non-creature permanents, we have Trading Post, which can tap and sacrifice an artifact to draw a card, and Trail of Crumbs, which makes us a food on entry and lets us pay 1 to look at our top 2 and grab a permanent whenever we sacrifice a food. Then for creatures, we have Beast Whisperer, which draws us a card whenever we cast a creature spell. Kesket the Flesh Sculptor allows us to sacrifice 3 other artifacts and or creatures to look at our top 3 cards and take 2 of them. Savvy Hunter lets us sacrifice 2 foods to draw a card. And Soul of the Harvest draws us a card whenever a non-token creature enters our battlefield. Some of our creatures are going to draw the ire of our opponents, and we also have a lot of sacrifice outlets in this deck. So it's important that we include some graveyard recursions to get our stuff back. Command the Dread Horde can bring any number of creatures and planeswalkers from all graveyards back to our battlefield. Don't overdo it though, because we gotta pay life equal to the total mana value of cards brought back. Reassembling Skeleton and Cauldron Familiar can be brought back from the graveyard repeatedly, sometimes generating multiple food tokens per turn on their own. Genesis can get a creature back to our hand from the graveyard on each upkeep, as long as it's in the graveyard. Green Warden of Murasa can get us any card back on entry, as well as on death if we exile it. And Regrowth gets us back whatever card we need from the yard. It's always important to make sure we have ways to deal with our opponent's threats. The removal suite for this deck has several creatures, so we can keep making those foods. We've got Acidic Slime, Reclamation Sage, Terastodon, and Wicked Wolf, which all take out permanents on entry. Thorn Mammoth fights a creature whenever you put a creature on board, and with a 6/6 body, it's going to be able to take out most creatures it fights. We've also got Herald of Anguish, which can be cast for just 2 mana if we've got enough food on board, and we can sacrifice an artifact to give a creature -2/-2 until end of turn. Great for dealing with those pesky indestructible creatures. We've also got some non-creature spells here with Bake Into a Pie, which kills a creature and makes us a food. Soul Shatter, which takes out our opponent's highest mana value creature or planeswalker, and In Garruk's Wake, a non-symmetrical board wipe. We've also got a card here which can potentially close out the game for us if we've got enough food on board, and that's Rampage of the Clans. It destroys all artifacts and enchantments, and gives each player a 3/3 centaur for each permanent they lost this way. There will be games where you won't want to cast this, but in some games you're going to end up with an army of 3/3s. You can cast this at instant speed before your turn and untap with a bunch of centaurs. Cast Overrun, and watch your opponents fall. Alright friends, that is our budget Gyome Master Chef deck. Thank you for watching. Leave us a comment below and let us know what you think. The link for the full deck list on Architect is in the notes below, so follow that link to take the deck for a spin in playtest mode. You'll also find the links down there to follow us on Twitter and Discord. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons, and don't forget to catch us streaming at twitch.tv/Scrap Trawlers every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central. Take care, everyone.